Don't get me wrong, I like Outriders. Its gameplay is fun, it has great loot, the best transmog system of any looter shooter, and builds that are varied and just complex enough to be satisfying without being overwhelming. So why is this game failing? And maybe more importantly, what can be done to save it? Outriders launched back in April 2021 to fairly positive reviews, which highlighted the combination of sadistically gratifying superpowers and destructive weaponry, some really cool monsters and environments, and a loot grind that, while not revolutionary, did offer some great looking options. However, this was let down by a buggy launch period, including the infamous gear wipe, a frustratingly laggy multiplayer experience, and the lack of variety in the endgame gameplay loot. Steam player counts dropped 95% within 2 months of launch, and by 98% by the end of July. But that was okay, wasn't it? This was billed as a one and done game after all. The New Horizon update in November 2021 was heralded as the beginning of an exciting new era, a step in the right direction which implemented a lot of the changes that players have been asking for. While there was no new story content, we did get 4 new expeditions, improved loot drops, and the best transmog system in any looter shooter, all for free. Sounds great, right? And player count did go up 10 times on launch, but within 2 months, things were back to where they started. Much of this was attributed to the lack of endgame content, which would be fixed by the upcoming expansion, WorldSlayer. The player base was excited. Finally, the great gameplay experience we all loved would get what it deserved, a game that would captivate players and keep them coming back for more. Well, no. Player counts took only a month to drop back down to their previous steady state, the fastest capitulation we have seen so far. So what is wrong with the game? I have my own view on this, but please do leave your thoughts in the comments below. Fundamentally, the Trials of Tara Guitar is just an extended expedition with the occasional boss fight, interspersed with some pointless running between zones which extends the completion time, but with no added value other than the bizarre story cliffhanger we are left with. The gameplay and enemy types in Trials and Expeditions are fundamentally the same. The lack of variety in game modes is the #1 issue with the game right now. It is crying out for something different. Just think about other looter shooters which have public events, instance dungeons, raids with actual non-shooting mechanics, team versus team, horde mode, survival, and PvP. Just PvP alone in other looter shooters can have multiple game modes, and it's quite often what keeps players logging on each day between expansions. Now, I don't expect to ever see PvP in Outriders, as balancing AoE builds would be impossible. Imagine an entire team all spamming Cold Snap or Ash Blast Overheat. It just wouldn't be fun. But alternate game modes should have been the minimum that was delivered in WorldSlayer. There was even a lack of variety in the 5 trial bosses. 3 identical arbiters with essentially the same mechanic that you could largely ignore with the right builds. Or Grill, whose big mechanic was standing in a circle, dodging projectiles telegraphed by another large red circle. None of these really called on us to play any differently from normal or do anything but play lip service to the boss mechanics. The game's challenge continues to largely be a DPS check. While we didn't get different game modes with WorldSlayer, what we did get was the grind. This has to be one of the most painful and pointless grinds ever to be introduced into a game. Albeit, Destiny 2 tries hard. The only reason to get to level 75 is that Apocalypse gear drops more frequently. That's it. No new content locked behind a power level. No new enemy or boss mechanics. No special loot. There isn't even a harder mode to play, as enemies scale off your levels, so the content at level 75 is exactly the same to play as it is at level 60. Given that you'll have your full Apocalypse build by around level 60, the big question then becomes, why bother to grind to level 75 at all? On top of that, the grind is painful. to the extreme. Initially gaining levels is a quick process, taking 1 or maybe 2 trial runs, but very quickly you're looking at hours or even days of gameplay just to move up 1 level. Compare that to the grind in the base game, where you leveled up each time you completed an expedition. The base grind felt much more about getting new gear than it did about some XP grind to artificially extend the life of the game. And once you do gain an Apocalypse tier, you are faced with the resource grind to get enough anomaly extract to level up all of your gear, or drop pods depending which content you have been grinding. There is only one reason I can see why a new resource would have been introduced into the game: to slow down the leveling process. And that, in reality, is what WorldSlayer delivered. We didn't get any real new content, just a repetitive grind for no real reason. Apocalypse gear was a huge mistake. Prior to its introduction, blue gear could be ground for through hunts, expeditions, and even vendors, and then upgraded to the right piece of epic gear. Now any gear that is not Apocalypse gear is irrelevant, so the vast majority of the gear that you now receive in the game is trash, and I find myself spending a ton of time just dismantling. And as we found out, there is a problem with the Apocalypse mods. Only certain mods can appear as Apocalypse mods on different pieces of gear. For example, the ever popular Captain Hunter can only be found as an Apocalypse mod on chest pieces, so if you are grinding it for it to appear on any other piece of armor, you're wasting your time. The fact that Apocalypse mods cannot be re-rolled also increases the RNG on loot to a ridiculous level, making build creation much more difficult. Outriders is not in a great state right now, being too grindy and without anything new to do in it. But I think that there is a way forward, and surprisingly this involves embracing some of the best aspects of live service games. Ultimately, for the game to become a significant franchise, new game modes are needed, including some or all of larger team raids with non-combat mechanics, team versus team PvE, a horde mode like the Division's Resistance, content with optional harder difficulty, maybe a survival mode where you start without any gear. You can only use what you find as you progress through the trials, and, at some stage, PvP. But new game modes take time to be developed. So what can be done now? Reducing the grind has to be the first step. Significantly lower the XP needed to level up both Apocalypse tiers and Ascension points. Make resources more abundant, or remove the need to use anomaly extract to level up Apocalypse gear. Allow us to re-roll Apocalypse mods, or let us improve any gear piece into Apocalypse gear, both of which using anomaly extract. Have a dedicated Apocalypse gear vendor and reduce the cost of it. Give us the ability to select which Apocalypse mod drops on the legendary gear we get from completing the trials or Eye of the Storm, or even opening up all expeditions and then giving them targeted loot to make grinding for gear pieces that little bit easier. All of these would make the journey to max level and build creation fun again. I mentioned aspects of live service games. What about a season pass that rewards us with resources or gear or even new emotes and cosmetics? How about making one expedition each week have a legendary mode with harder enemies and better loot? Have a legendary hunt or bounty each week handed out by our friendly barman Noah? Even a weekly legendary quest. There are lots of options to make us want to come back for more. I would also like to see a central hub where players can hang out. There is even a space for it. The Easter egg in Marshall's Complex. How cool would it be to be able to see leaderboards of expedition completion times on the screens? This game has possibly the best transmog system, but hardly anyone gets to see what your character looks like, so give us a place to hang out and show off. This game has so much potential, but it will die if something isn't done soon.